Late at night, the poor rancher woke to whispers moving like cold wind outside his wooden cabin. The land was silent, yet two deep voices spoke his name together, slow and clear. He felt fear, but also a strange pull, as if fate itself was calling. He had saved two wounded giants earlier that day, without knowing who they were now. His kindness returned as danger and mystery. His heart raced while memories of their bleeding bodies and silent eyes filled his mind. The door creaked, though no one touched it. Shadows stretched across the floor. The whispers grew closer, promising protection or destruction. He could not tell. He stood alone, holding his breath, knowing this moment would decide his future. Whatever they wanted would bind his life to theirs forever. And once the night passed, nothing would ever be the same again, and the land waited quietly for dawn. The story follows a poor rancher who lived alone on a quiet land far from busy towns and loud voices. He woke before sunrise, worked until his hands shook, and slept with worries heavier than his blankets. He owned little more than his small wooden cabin, a few animals, and his honesty. Money never stayed with him, but dignity never left him. People passed his land without noticing him, calling him weak or unlucky. Yet he never turned bitter. His heart remained open even when the world gave him nothing in return. Every lonely evening tested his spirit, but he chose kindness over anger and patience over hate. Unknown to him, fate was moving silently around his life, watching every sacrifice, every silent tear, and every good choice he made. That quiet land was not empty, it was waiting, and the poor rancher did not know that his simple honesty was about to pull him into a destiny far greater than survival. As the sun fell behind the distant hills and shadows stretched across the quiet land, the poor rancher walked beyond his fence, following a sound that did not belong to the evening wind. His steps slowed when he saw movement near the dry creek, and his breath caught as two massive figures lay against the rocks. Their bodies were strong, yet broken. Blood darkened the soil beneath them, and pain showed clearly on their faces. They were giant Apache twins, known in stories for strength and fear, and most men would have run without looking back. But the rancher stood frozen, not by fear, but by shock at their suffering. One twin tried to rise, but collapsed, while the other watched silently, eyes sharp, yet weak. In that moment, the rancher understood the danger, because helping them could mark him as an enemy of many, and refusing could mean their death. The land felt heavier, as if waiting for his choice. His mind warned him to turn away, but his heart refused to listen. He remembered his own lonely nights and the hunger he once felt, and without speaking, he stepped closer. The twins followed his movements carefully, unsure if he was threat or mercy. He removed his coat and pressed it against a deep wound, using shaking hands while keeping his voice calm. He offered water and spoke gently, not asking names or reasons, only telling them they were safe for now. Every sound felt louder, every second slower, because discovery by others would mean violence. Yet he did not stop. He dragged supplies from his cabin, cleaned wounds with care, and stayed alert through the growing darkness. The twins did not attack or resist. They only watched him with confusion and something close to respect. When night deepened, he helped them reach shelter hidden from the open land. His body ached and fear lived in his chest, but regret never appeared. He knew the risk, yet kindness guided him stronger than survival instinct. As the twins rested, their breathing steadier, the rancher kept watch outside, listening to distant sounds, wondering if dawn would bring peace or punishment. He had crossed a line without knowing the cost, and the quiet land no longer felt empty. It felt alive with tension and fate moving closer with every heartbeat. Night wrapped the land in deep silence as the rancher moved with careful purpose, returning to the shelter, carrying warm water, clean cloth, and the last of his medicine. He worked slowly, knowing one wrong move could cost his life, yet his hands stayed steady as he cleaned torn skin and pressed bandages tight. The twins watched him closely, their strength still present, but locked behind pain and exhaustion. He asked no questions and offered no judgment, because he believed suffering did not need permission to be eased. Hours passed as he stayed beside them, listening to the wind and distant animals. While danger lingered beyond the darkness, he fed them small portions saved for winter and gave them his own bed, choosing the cold floor instead. Every sound outside made his heart jump, yet he never stepped away. When fever shook one twin, he stayed awake, wiping sweat and whispering calm words. Even though his voice trembled inside his chest, fear battled mercy, and mercy won every time. He understood that sheltering them could bring hunters, soldiers, or enemies, but he also knew turning away would follow him forever. The fire burned low as dawn crept closer, and still he stayed alert, guarding them like family. When the twins finally slept peacefully, the land felt different. As if witnessing a rare truth, the rancher sat back, exhausted, realizing courage was not loud or proud, but quiet and costly. He had nothing to gain and everything to lose, yet his choice felt right, because it came from who? He was not what he owned. Outside, the stars faded, and morning light touched the hills, unaware that a bond stronger than blood was forming inside that small shelter. A poor man had given safety to feared warriors without demanding loyalty or reward, and in that silent act his kindness spoke in a language deeper than fear, one that would echo long after the wounds healed and the world learned what had been done. In the dark, morning light entered the shelter softly, revealing the twins awake and sitting upright, their wounds closed enough to move. Without pain, they spoke nothing, yet their eyes followed the rancher with deep focus as he prepared food, repaired torn cloth, and checked the land beyond the door. Their silence carried weight, not empty, but deliberate, as if words were being saved for a moment not yet chosen. He felt their presence even when they stood behind him, calm and watchful like shadows that breathed. The rancher noticed how they studied his habits, the way he shared water evenly, how he never turned his back suddenly, how he respected space without fear. Each quiet hour tightened an unseen thread between them, creating a bond that did not need language. The land outside remained still, yet tension lived in the air, like a storm waiting to break. He sensed power in them, not violent, but controlled and ancient, and it stirred something uneasy in his chest. At night, they sat near the fire, listening, while he spoke simple thoughts aloud, filling silence with honesty rather than questions. They never interrupted, yet their attention never drifted. Days passed, and strength returned to their steps, while mystery grew heavier. The rancher wondered if danger would arrive with them, or if they themselves were the danger, held back by choice. Their eyes held stories he could not read and intentions he could not guess. Still, they respected every boundary, never touched his belongings, never crossed lines, never spoke his name, until the moment felt earned. This restraint unsettled him more than threats would have. He felt watched yet protected. Unsure whether he was host or guest in his own shelter, the quiet land seemed to lean inward, listening to their unspoken agreement. When he worked the fields, they stood at a distance, scanning the horizon with purpose, and when strangers passed far away, the twins shifted slightly, like guardians responding to signals. Only they understood. The rancher sensed change moving closer, though its shape remained hidden. His nights grew restless, not from fear but anticipation, as if something important waited just beyond understanding. He trusted them without reason, yet his instincts warned that silence was not weakness, but preparation. Whatever they were deciding, it involved him deeply and permanently. The fire burned lower each evening, and the stars above felt closer, as if bearing witness to a turning point still unspoken. The rancher felt small, yet chosen, standing between mystery and fate, knowing that soon the quiet would end, and when it did, his life would move beyond solitude into something far greater than survival. That night, the rancher lay awake as the fire faded and the land settled into deep stillness, when low voices began to move through the darkness, not loud, yet clear enough to carry meaning. He did not rise or make a sound, but listened as the twins whispered together in a rhythm that felt old and deliberate. Their words were calm, yet heavy, speaking of loyalty earned through action and protection given without demand. They spoke of standing with him as one presence, not divided by blood or fear, and as the meaning reached him, his chest tightened with emotion. He realized they were not planning escape or departure, but a promise far greater than shelter. Fear mixed with gratitude as understanding settled, because such devotion carried weight and consequence. The rancher felt small beneath the truth that his kindness had crossed into destiny. The whispers continued, describing unseen threats and paths that would never touch his land again, because they would stand between danger and his door. Their voices carried respect, not obligation, and that distinction shook him deeply. He understood then that silence had been their test, and his patience their answer. The wind outside shifted, as if listening, and the land felt different, no longer empty, but guarded. His heart pounded, not from fear of them, but from the responsibility their vow placed upon him. He had never sought protection or power, yet it had found him through mercy. The twins spoke of unity, strength, and purpose bound to his life, and when silence returned, the weight of it pressed gently against his soul. He remained still, staring into darkness, knowing that once dawn arrived, nothing would return to how it was. He felt tears gather, not from weakness, but from the overwhelming truth that he was no longer alone in the world. The fire crackled once, then died, leaving only stars above, and guardians near. The rancher closed his eyes, accepting what had been given not as a gift, but as a bond that could not be undone. In that quiet moment, fear faded, replaced by resolve, because he understood loyalty was not demanded, it was chosen, and it had chosen him. The night held its breath, as if sealing the promise, and the land rested, knowing a line had been drawn not with force, but with trust that would echo long after the whispers faded into silence. Dawn arrived quietly, and with it the twins finally spoke directly to him, standing tall in the pale light. Their presence filling the small space without threat or pride, they revealed who they were, not with loud claims, but calm truth. Legendary Apache warriors known across the land not for cruelty, but for unbroken vows and fierce protection. The rancher felt the weight of their words settle slowly as understanding replaced uncertainty. They made clear they wanted nothing. He owned not his land, not his shelter, not his life, because those things held no value compared to the bond already formed. What they sought was purpose shared and loyalty returned together, not as masters or guests, but as brothers bound by choice. His kindness had crossed tribal lines, and fear, because it was given freely, without calculation. They told him his actions had been watched, measured, and honored in ways he could not see. Every night, they had guarded the edges of his land, sensing danger before it formed, turning threats away without sound or sign. He realized then why strangers avoided the area and why silence had felt protective rather than empty. The truth struck deep, because protection of that kind carried history, sacrifice, and responsibility. The twins explained that brotherhood once given could not be undone, and standing with him meant standing against any force that threatened his peace. The rancher felt emotion rise, not from pride, but humility, because he had never believed himself worthy of legends. He looked at his worn hands and simple life, and saw it now through new eyes, not small, but meaningful. The land outside seemed brighter, as if acknowledging the reveal, and the morning wind carried a sense of calm that felt earned, not borrowed. He understood that enemies would now think twice, and allies would never need to ask. The twins did not promise victory or wealth, only presence and unwavering support, and that honesty made the bond stronger. The rancher nodded slowly, accepting them not as shields, but as family forged through compassion. He knew the world beyond his land would remain harsh, yet his path would no longer be walked alone. As the sun climbed higher, the three stood together, facing the horizon, not as poor man and feared warriors, but as equals bound by trust. The reveal did not bring noise or celebration, only quiet certainty that kindness had transformed fate, and in doing so had turned potential enemies into brothers who would stand together no matter what darkness approached from beyond the hills. From that day on, the rancher's life moved forward under a quiet shield. No eye could see, yet everyone could feel. No thief crossed his fence, no threat reached his door, and no fear lived in his nights. The land stood calm, protected not by weapons, but by honor earned through mercy. Travelers spoke in low voices about the place where trouble never stayed and danger always turned away. The rancher remained the same man, humble, steady, and kind, yet the world around him treated him differently, because kindness had rewritten his fate. He never claimed power and never told the story, yet the land itself carried the truth. His simple act had created a legacy stronger than force, proving that mercy can build alliances fear never can. In the end, he did not gain riches or fame. He gained something greater, belonging, purpose, and brothers who stood with him as one. And long after the whispers faded, the lesson remained: kindness does not make you weak, it makes you unforgettable.